Greetings, warriors, veterans, and America-loving citizens from sea to shining sea. Welcome to Frontlines of Freedom. I'm Colonel Denny Gillum. The Frontlines of Freedom AMVETS team really appreciate you joining us this fine day in America. Here's what we have for you this hour. We're going to start by talking with Navy Reserve Officer Todd Brooks, who's also very active in the Ford Motor Company and their veterans group. Then we'll learn about a new movie being made from a book written by one of my West Point classmates, Tom Anthony. And naturally, Quentin Roberts and I will discuss Service Academy football. Of course, we'll conclude with our weekly mailbag, military history, and our Armed America report. Frontlines of Freedom is proud to be a partner with the Eisenhower Center, and after the impact, they really do great things for our troops with traumatic brain injury. Yeah, they help NFL players too. Troops, I welcome your comments and questions. Contact me through frontlinesoffreedom.com. Now it's time to meet Todd Brooks. Todd's a Naval Reserve officer and a guy that, we know a lot of people in common. Welcome to Frontlines of Freedom, Tom.
Thank you, Denny, and I appreciate for having me on the show, and thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you. Todd, tell us about your military service. When and why did you join, and talk about what jobs you've had?
Well, it really started back in 1984. I signed up for active duty and served until 1991. I was an in-flight electronics technician on a P-3 Orion, big anti-submarine warfare aircraft, and that later transitioned into an ISR platform, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. I got off active duty in 91 and kind of started a career at Ford Motor Company. And it really wasn't until 9/11, just a couple days after that, I had signed back up for the reserves in hopes of one day, being able to make a difference and contribute to this global war on terrorism. Since signing back up, I actually reaffiliated with a Patrol Squadron 92 out of Brunswick, Maine, and started flying again in P-3s as a senior enlisted person, and deployed a few times to Central America, South America, doing a lot of counter-narcotics missions, and the Navy kind of disestablished as part of the base realignment and closure Brunswick, and at that time, I picked up a mobilization to go serve in Iraq in 2008 through 2009, and while I was over there, I was accepted into a commissioning program to become a reserve intelligence officer. And from that point, basically deployed again, and just recently got back, actually, from a 15-month deployment, serving a split deployment between East Africa and Afghanistan.
So you're a naval intelligence officer. I don't know about the Navy, but in the Army, we say that military intelligence is a contradiction in terms.
I've heard that before.
I won't ask you if you think that's true with the Navy because you're still there.
Yes.
So after you got off active duty, you joined Ford Motor Company. And one of the things that your calls to active duty, whether it was just for a weekend or a week or whether it was for a year or whatever it was, that took you away from your job. And some employers are not really easy to get along with on that. I take it from the people that I know who work at Ford that Ford has accepted that and even been encouraging. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, Ford has really been exceptional in terms of support for all of our, National Guard and Reserve members. Obviously, since 9/11, the landscape changed dramatically for any of our folks that have been, serving in the National Guard or Reserves. The old school 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, that completely has been rewritten. And now the forces are truly an operational component, supplementing our active forces all around the globe in this war on terrorism and elsewhere, even during national disasters as well. When you look at basically 2005, just to give you a quick statistic, we had about 150,000 troops boots on ground in Iraq, and 40% of those troops boots on ground were reserve members.
I haven't seen the exact numbers, but all the stats I have say that's very, very accurate. The way we do war, the way our reserve components participate in war is so radically different than from 30 years ago that it's hardly worth talking about.
With all the challenges and requirements, around the globe right now on many fronts, you look at where we're spread out right now between Afghanistan, back in Iraq, Syria, East Africa. I mean, there's a lot of people around the globe right now, and to be able to have a full-time force, we wouldn't be able to really afford it as a nation. And I've heard the number that it's kind of 1 to 5. You can have up to 5 reservists or National Guards folks for what you can have basically employ one full-time active duty member. So there's a cost benefit really to our country to be able to employ us in such a manner.
Indeed it is. This is Colonel Denny Gillum on Frontlines of Freedom. We're talking with Todd Brooks from Ford Motor Company about the challenge that our nation and our employers have when we use our Reserve and National Guard individuals as much as we are in the nation. And it's not getting better. The world, if anything, is more dangerous today than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. So, Todd, it's clear that the Reserve component folks are never going to get bored. What do you do for Ford?
I'm a supervisor. I manage a test engineering section for quality in a fuel economy and emissions testing laboratory.
I've always said that a good leader is always training his replacement. In your case, you've got to have somebody who can step in and keep the ball rolling for Ford should you be pulled out. Am I right?
Well, unfortunately, in my position, when I got pulled out, it left a void. And they literally, I had to interview, and basically my replacement was promoted into my position. Thankfully, when I came back, the group, because of the drawdown, when the country went through the rough times, there was about 5 people serving in my department at the leadership level, and we were down to just 2. And thankfully, they were like, we really need to expand this back out and get more emphasis, especially in the, test quality. Fuel economy and emissions is a big thing, especially when you look and see what happened to VW. We want to make sure that we're doing all the right things. So they kind of created a new position for me, and I was right back into my department. And they were equally as accommodating when I came back from Iraq in 2008 and 2009. I was very lucky. They actually were able to get me right back into my exact position when I left, same team. And that individual that took over for me was subsequently promoted and moved on to another position later on. So it really helped a lot with, alleviating kind of that stress and that transition, because, when you go away for 13 months or 15 months, such as the case of my last deployment, you're not doing the same thing. And coming back, there's a significant transition period, trying to, reacclimate and just get back in your groove. And they've done everything they can to try and alleviate those stressors and make it as easy as possible.
And a Ford Motor Company has a Veterans Network group, and I'm sure you're part of it. I would presume that your experience with your fellow male and female veterans is that they all treated pretty much the same way by Ford.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, I was part of the team. We had about 6 people that worked really hard to get the Veterans Network group established back in 2007. We started work in 2005 trying to go through the corporate approval chain, and, we were officiated in 2007. And it really was, as a part, brought about to help with the challenges that our reserve and guardsmen were having, the uncertainty of leaving, the uncertainty of coming back, and just difficulties managing HR and getting help for your family when you're away. And many of our members that deployed, we had one gentleman that his flagpole was knocked down, in a storm, and a lot of folks from his department rallied up and built a new flagpole, new cement base and everything for him while he was away. And, that was a pretty cool thing that his department, some of the members of the veteran group were able to help. For myself, when I was over in Iraq, we were doing some security patrols out in town in southern Iraq, and my team was like, "What can we do for you?" And I said, thankfully, I've really got everything that I need. I've got food, I got a place to lay my head at night, and I don't need anything. But if you really want to send something, I said, when we go into these towns, these kids have nothing. I said, if you could send something for me to give to the kids, that would be amazing. And it took about a month or so, but I got like 40 boxes of coloring books, stuffed animals. And when we were able to roll into the towns in, Safwan and Basra and Unkasar, the kids were just, they were going crazy. And, the hugs that you get from those kids and the kisses were just so genuine. And we may not be able to understand a single word of each other due to the language barrier, but, that feeling of love and that sincerity in the hugs is, pretty universal language. So it was pretty cool.
I would say that's an understatement, and it's sowing some seeds you couldn't sow any other way.
Absolutely.
Todd, that's a great story. Thank you for taking time to join us today. Thank you for what your service to our nation now. And thanks to Ford for making it so easy for the Net Guard and Reserve members who work for them to be faithful to both the Guard and Reserve and their company. I appreciate you, and I appreciate Ford.
Thank you, Danny. I really appreciate it. Take care.